Last term, and this is a question through you to Chris Murray, last term Councillor Powers had put a motion forward to take a look at the geographical amount. It was supposed to be sent to governance because both Councillor Pasuta and I, back, I guess, wards 14 and 11 were given an extra amount of money for driving around. So now we're 16 years later, and the amount of money that we have, if you take a look at our mileages, it's just not adding up. So my understanding is Councillor Powers made a motion that this was to be sent to governance. To update on that one?
Sorry? Chair, I don't recall specifically it actually being dealt with through governance, so
okay.
I've just made a note to find out where it's at, and we can get that thing moving for sure.
Thank you very much. And just for FYI, I can't speak for Ward 14, but Ward 11 has grown 78.6%. So that just means that you're just busier running around. So I just wanted to see whether or not that there was any movement on that. Follow up, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved then, unless I see another indication, by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you. 5.8 is our Fair Wage Policy and Fair Wage Schedule Complaints Annual Report. Are there any questions or discussion with respect to item 5.8? So moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Thank you very much. 5.9 is our 2015 fourth quarter request for tenders and proposals report. Are there questions or discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Vanderbeek and Councillor Pearson, all in favor? Thank you. 5.10, 2015 fourth quarter emergency and non-competitive procurements report. Are there questions or discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Collins, all in favor? 5.11 is our 2015 fourth quarter non-compliance with procurement policy report. Are there questions or discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Pasuta, all in favor? Thank you. 5.12, 2015 annual follow-up of outstanding audit recommendations. Are there questions or discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Vanderbeek and Councillor Johnson, all in favor? Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
As you know, I had another requirement this morning,
yes.
Mr. Chair, and so I wanted just, if I can, go back to 5.8 just for a question, if you would permit me to.
So, Denis, what is the right procedural way to do that?
Not going to change anything. I just want to ask a question.
Through the chair, we can go back to that item. It was just, it had been received, but we can go back if he has any questions regarding the item.
Sure. So, Councillor Ferguson, please go ahead.
So, through you to the right staff person, it looks like, I assume it's Rick, but I'm not sure. But Rick, you can deflect it to someone else if you want to. I'm surprised we only had 2 complaints about this, or 3, but 2 were, it was found they were non-compliant. I hear a lot of rumbling out in the industry of not paying the fair wage. Do you think the $5,000 cost to do an audit that the complainant has to pay if there's found to be no violation of the fair wage policy is scaring a lot of people away?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We haven't heard any people coming forward and suggesting that's the case. The majority of the complaints we received, in fact, these 3, were from electrical union. They they visit work sites, they talk to the workers. If they feel that they're not being paid in accordance with the schedule, they are the ones who are filing the complaints with the city. And at this point in time, there's only been the one that's referenced in here that was found to be compliant, where the company wasn't responsible for paying the cost.
I've heard the same thing through you, Mr. Chairman, Rick, that it is the unions that are the only one that can afford to file these complaints for fear of having to cost $5,000. But if I'm an employee of a small company and I'm aware of the fair wage policy and I'm not getting paid in accordance to it, do you think that would frighten them from making a complaint if they feel that they have to pay $5,000?
You, Mr. Chair, I don't think the $5,000 would be that big an impediment. Probably the bigger concern for the employee would be possibly losing their job if the employer was to find out somehow that their employees had all complaints and all information around the complaints are confidential. It's done by our external audit firm, the investigation, and it's not shared with anybody except
Okay, what about a small competitor? $5,000 would mean a lot to them if they're playing by the rules and the competitor's not. I'm just puzzled why it costs $5,000 to go in and check that. Is that a true cost recovery, or are you actually making some profit at that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the cost varies dependent upon the complexity of the work that's done. If it involves many subcontractors, it can substantially exceed $5,000. The average cost, without incorporating the cost of procurement staff to be involved in the investigation, is typically around the $4,000 mark. And there's significant amount of time spent by Mary Ann Morris in procurement, working with the external auditors, answering the questions of the contractor that's being investigated. And the fair wage complaints only pertain to contracts in excess of $500,000. So it's not really with the really small type of contractors and the small contracts. They're fairly large contracts that are being fair wage applies to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Returning to the agenda, I believe we just completed 5.12, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll move on to 6. Committee has received correspondence from Mr. Yusuf respecting his matter, which is the request for audit of wastewater and water billing calculation. Members of committee, do you have any questions of staff regarding this matter? Councillor Collins, please.
Having read the correspondence, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask our staff to provide a summary of their dealings with that and maybe provide some background as to why they've taken the position they have according to Mr. Yusuf and his correspondence.
Thank you. I believe that's Mr. McKinnon or another representative.
So through the chair, I'm going to ask John Savoya, who's familiar with the file as well
Please.
as with our policy, to speak to our policy and how this particular circumstance, whether it aligns or doesn't align to our policy.
Thank you, Mr. Zagaric. Please go ahead, sir.
So through the chair, the property in question is 74 Edwina Place, Hamilton. It's near the Upper Gauge and Link area. It's a single detached house. It is a rental property. And as committee is probably aware, we do allow the practice to bill or redirect a water bill to a tenant, but ultimately the financial responsibility remains with the property owner. So in this property, there was a tenant that had as of July 31st, 2015, left the property. There was no tenant immediately following that. So the owner took over the account on August 1st of last year, and the current tenant took possession or took occupancy on September 27th. Horizon will read the meter on the date of account holder change or final close if it was a sale, unless there's a regular scheduled water meter reading within 16 business days. And that's been right from day one with our service level agreement with Horizon, that practice. And so in this particular case, as mentioned, the prior tenant had vacated the property as of July 31st, 2015. There was a meter reading taken on August 19th, and that reading showed that the average daily use expressed in terms of cubic meters in the final billing period for the tenant was approaching 1.6 cubic meters per day, which is fairly high for a house. The next reading that took place from Horizon Utilities was on October 14th. So what happens is you've got a reading that is now straddling two account holders. So the reading that was found on October 14th reflected actual water usage of 203 cubic meters between August 19th and October 14th. That's 3.63 cubic meters per day. Very high, certainly reflecting what one would expect with a leak. Per our service level agreement with Horizon, when you have this usage straddling two account holders, it's apportioned equally to the two account holders based on the number of days each account holder was responsible for. So that 3.63 cubic meters per day was applied between the landlord and the tenant. Because it was only from September 27th to October 14th, the tenant took a much smaller portion of that ratio. The water was not turned off when the property was vacated. It is actually a requirement of the Waterworks bylaw that when premises are vacated, that the water is supposed to be shut off through the street by contacting Public Works, specifically Hamilton Water. That was not done in this case. So the water was definitely left on, and we had this high usage. The billings were done the way I suggested. They were apportioned there. The current tenant has paid their bills. The current tenant was in contact with Horizon on a couple occasions. Horizon does record the telephone calls, and the tenant the current tenant did say that they had fixed a problem with the toilet. It was a sticky handle, so there was a leaking toilet situation. They actually made the repair, and since then, the two billings that have occurred since the toilet's apparently been repaired have been very low. They're reflecting normal usage without leakage. The property owner, the landlord, has requested that all the high usage, that 203 cubic meters, be applied to the tenant. And per policy, we have refused to do that. We're saying the tenant is not responsible for the entire amount of that water usage. So that's basically the foundation of the landlord's complaint. He wants the entire usage to be applied to the tenant, suggesting that because the property was vacant, there couldn't have been water usage. I can give you lots of examples when water is left on at the property that you have, when it's vacant, that you have leakage. That's the reason why we have the long-standing requirement to shut off water at vacant properties, because when they're unoccupied, you have leakage can occur and it's not going to be identified and addressed. So that's basically where things are at.
Councillor Collins?
I thank John for the information. I have no further questions, and at the appropriate time, I would move to receive some correspondence.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? That is great. 8.1, cellular services and devices. Are there questions or discussion with respect to 8.1? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? 8.2, residential protective plumbing subsidy. Now, on this matter, and Mr. Clerk, correct me if anything I am about to do or say is somehow procedurally flawed. I would like to say we received a request from Councillor Jackson yesterday that this matter be considered by our councillor group as a whole. For that reason, I'm wondering if any of my colleagues on committee would like to move a motion to move this to GIC. So Councillor Pearson, Councillor Johnson, all in favor? So we'll consider that a GIC. Thank you, colleagues. Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I have a copy of the story that was published in the Hamilton Spectator where the Serenity Plumbing was quoted on. And it said that there's three different companies work together to get these three quotes, and they take it for each other, and then they decide afterwards who needs the work the most, and they hand it out to them. I have a copy of the story here. That sure sounds like price fixing to me. So, and I haven't seen legal touch that yet. At least it isn't touched on in item 8.2. The fact that we have a quote from this individual saying that they share the work around, I wonder whether, when it comes back to GIC, whether legal can give an opinion based on what they reported in the spec article.
Very good. So, truth be told, I'm hesitant to start a big conversation right now since we're considering a GIC.
I just wanted to know if Janice was comfortable with providing something out when it's referred to GIC. And if she needs a copy of the article, I'd be happy to give it to her.
So, can we take that as a direction? I see, Janice, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'll take that as direction, and I certainly will try to get a copy of that after this meeting, Councillor Ferguson. Thank you.
And Councillor Whitehead, I heard you indicate, however, I think we should talk about this at GIC instead of here. Is that okay with you, Councillor Whitehead?
I didn't come here. I came here for 8.2.
Forgive me.
I had no idea, Mr. Chair, that I wouldn't be able to participate in the discussion with the motion going to GIC. I certainly support that matter. I am the chair of the Public Works Committee. This is a program that is actually overseen through the Public Works Committee. So I will be raising questions in respect to whether there's a different model to get more efficiency so we can avoid these kind of issues. I just want to highlight that I'll be bringing that proposal at the GIC. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. So that dispenses with 8.2. We're now on 8.3, proposed fair wage policy and fair wage schedule review and proposed amendments. Are there questions or discussion re 8.3? Seeing none, Councillor Pasuta and Councillor Vanderbeek, all in favor? Thank you. 8.4, property and liability insurance renewal report. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Oh yes, please, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you're moving right along, but just a question to staff. So I see what our premium is, and it's good for the public to know that, especially the viewing public. So this is the premium of $4,070,240 through you, Mr.
Mr. Zagarek, please comment.
So through the chair, that's correct. That's before taxes, inclusive of taxes. It's approximately 4.225 million.
Thank you. I also want to ask, what is our deductible on that policy?
So through the chair, in terms of municipal liability, it's $250,000.
Slips and falls, this includes accidents with any of our city vehicles, damage due to tree falling on somebody's property, etc.
So through the chair, if I can direct committee to Appendix A, page 1 of 1, identifies the coverage and deductible as it relates to the type of coverage. So the deductibles vary according to the type of coverage, and you'll see municipal liability, it's $250,000. However, when it comes to property and city auto, it increases to $500,000, as well as environmental impairment liability. So again, there is a schedule in Appendix A of the report.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I really wanted it more for the viewing public because they never hear this information and understand what we pay as far as our costs as a municipality, not only for liability, for also say for MPAC. And we pay for that service every year, and it's large. It's almost, I'd say it's almost five, is it, no, I'm sorry.
So through the chair, our latest MPAC billing for 2016 is just over $6 million.
Right, so there's 10 million right there, just insurance and impact. I want that out there for the viewing public. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. The floor is now Councillor Johnson's.
Thank you very much. And through you too, Mike, we have all this insurance. Our parks are covered, I'm assuming, correct? Our cemeteries, every piece of property that the city of Hamilton owns. Is that what I'm reading in this?
So through the chair, that's correct, in terms of all city property as well as our assets.
Okay, thank you for that. So just as a technicality, if I wanted to arrange a community get-together and I applied to rent the park out and I provide insurance as per requested because we're having more than 25 people, and somebody trips over a swing or somebody falls in the grass and they turn around and sue the city and the organizers, me as an organizer, am I covered under this, or is it, I just want to know through the chair. I'm worried because I've known that we've had some incidences in the past. We've got a lot of Easter egg hunts coming up now, folks. We've got a lot of summer picnics, church parties that are using our parks. So if I trip in the park and I'm at the church picnic and I sue the church and I sue the city of Hamilton, are we taking any responsibility for our parks, and maybe the swing was in the wrong spot, or maybe the clump of grass didn't get looked at? I don't know.
So through the chair, I'm going to ask John McLennan, our manager of risk management, to respond to the councillor's question.
Thank you.
Through the chair, certainly every claim situation is different. It would boil down to an investigation of the claim and where we might find where the negligence laid. If it was one of our swings, for instance, that had not been maintained or had fallen apart and someone hurt themselves on it, we would be paying the compensation in that instance. It was a situation where perhaps there was some improper supervision during the event, then, we would look to the insurance coverage of the event. Chances are we're going to get sued or at least get a claim in any case where it happens on our property, but, you investigate and you make your decisions accordingly.
Okay, thank you, and through you to John. Because I've known of a few in the history of what we've been going through, and we've got this Easter egg hunt. Is it up to them to put signs up saying wear proper shoes, don't wear high heels in our nice soft grass? Is there something that we need to do to protect the organizations that are all volunteers, and probably the insurance policy that they paid for either got paid through their sponsors or somebody out of the goodness of their heart? So what do we do for these organizations that are using these parks? Let's face it, there's 1,001 accidents waiting to happen.
That's true, and if they come to us for advice, we're happy to help. If you want to refer them to our office, we can certainly assist where we can. I mean, a lot of it I mean, people in our parks every day, and there's a lot of personal responsibility and a common sense application there too. You know, don't be wearing high heels on soft ground, that kind of thing.
It's good advice.
Well, and just to be fair, and like I said, and I'm trying not to reveal too much, but, you know, somebody coming into a park wearing ill-prepared shoes falls in the middle of an event, and then all of a sudden now that event, and not our insurance, and I'm looking at how much money we're spending on insurance, is there not a way that we can protect some of these volunteer organizations who don't have this money, and it isn't their property, and they wouldn't go through with a what do you call those rollers that even out the ground once a year so that nobody gets hurt, and God forbid, wearing high heels.
Yeah, but if it's a matter of the park condition, that's on us.
But grass is grass.
Right, and you know, for any event, they're going to have coverage, so it's not going to be them paying, if they were negligent somehow, it's not going to be them paying out on the claim, it'll be the game day coverage.
Yeah, it will be, and we all know that once you put a claim in, John, your coverage now either doubles next year, or they just say, no, we're not going to do this, you're too much. So I think that's where my dilemma comes in, if it's, so we can take this offline, but I just
Sure.
really wanted to put it out there that when you have insurance and you rent out our parks and we have something happen in our parks that really was not, in my opinion, any fault to the organizers, it just happened to be a clump of grass, then that's where I really have an issue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson, for raising an important set of questions. And I hear an indication, I believe Councillor Whitehead. Please go ahead, sir.
Just for clarification, it's not based on, and maybe I can get this corrected, it's not based on putting claims in, it's based on whether those claims are ratified through the courts. If they're not ratified through the courts, you're not going to have an impact on the insurance. So I just want to provide that clarity.
Thank you very much. Is there any further conversation or are there any further questions regarding this matter? Seeing none? I believe we're still on item 8.4. So motion to approve item 8.4 from Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you very much. 8.5, Procurement Subcommittee Report 16-001. Moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. No motions today to my knowledge. Notices of motion, colleagues. I see no indications for notices. There is no general information to share. We do have 12.1, which is our AFNA interview subcommittee report 16-001. This is a private confidential, but I don't think we need to go in camera rather. Councillor Collins and Councillor Pearson, and thank you to both of you for working on this matter. All in favor of approving 12.1, our lists. Carried. So, might I please have a motion to adjourn? Vanderbeek, Ferguson, all in favor. Thank you very much, colleagues.